and usually temporary paralysis of a facial nerve. For Sue McIntyre, the experience was terrifying. Ashley Bloomfield has since rejected her plea, saying he was not satisfied the exemption criteria had been met.
So you basically said this is going to be like, well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, the two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated,
that is what it is. So, yep.
While this is by no means the largest protest Parliament has seen, it's one of the ugliest. Speaker Trevor Mallard, the boss of Parliament, looked on, the police resorting to forceful removal.
Look, what we saw today was not representative of the vast bulk of New Zealanders.
Did you consider going outside to meet them?
No.
But underneath all of that, Madam Speaker, there is a river of filth.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome to the first session of the New Zealand People's Court. My name is Justice Southey, and I am the judge assigned to this court. You have been summoned for the case of the people and the New Zealand government. This is a criminal case under the structure of the International Criminal Court. This case has been brought by the plaintiffs, the people of New Zealand, who will be represented by Prosecutor Heka Robertson. The defendant is the New Zealand government. As yet, they have chosen not to attend court and have not provided representation. If they do not show, we will only hear from the prosecution today. The charge brought against the defendant is crimes against humanity, as detailed in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Specifically, Article 7(1)(k). Inhumane acts intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body, mental or physical health. This is a serious charge. As the jury, your responsibility is to listen carefully to the accusations being made and the first-hand experiences of the witnesses. And after this, I will briefly recess the court for you to deliberate, and then will require your decision as to whether the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the crime that has been claimed. Jury, I thank you for your service today. I now invite the prosecutor to present his opening statements. Court is now in session.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, from 2020 to 2021 and 2022, in almost every area of society, this government has continuously failed to uphold its responsibility to its people. Like a financial sieve, its irresponsible decision-making has been draining New Zealand of resource. It has emptied taxpayer coffers as it implements inhumane policies in an effort to boost its own reputation on the international political stage. It locked out Kiwis from their own country at a time when they needed home the most. It left New Zealand businesses bleeding out, many with little chance of survival if they hadn't already died. And the hopes and dreams of hard-working everyday Kiwis lay steaming in its wake. New Zealand, Your Honour, is wounded and hurting, and the abuser is its own leadership. Shortly, Your Honour, I will invite a number of witnesses to the stand, and they will provide evidence of how the inhumane acts of the New Zealand government over the COVID-19 health response period have affected them personally. These accounts are confronting, but they show the brutality, the inhumanity that is the true representation of this government. Today, these witnesses will show you, and the jury will prove beyond reasonable doubt, that the New Zealand government is guilty of crimes against humanity for inhumane acts affected on its own people.
Thank you, prosecution. I now invite you to call your first witness to the stand.
Thank you, Justice Southey. The United Nations called domestic violence the shadow pandemic. Contributing factors included the stress of lockdowns, housing insecurity, financial stresses due to income loss and unemployment, and people's isolation from their support systems. And in New Zealand, we were not exempt from this. Prior to COVID, in 2019, Your Honour, there were 151,609 reported cases, domestic violence cases. That rose to 165,039 in 2020 as these restrictions were implemented. And at the height of the government's COVID measures in 2021, that number increased to over 172,000 cases of domestic violence. And those are just the ones that are reported. I now invite the first witness to the stand, Hazel Tukuriri. Hazel, you're a witness to the claim that this government has acted inhumanely against its own people. Can you please tell the jury about what it was like to parent your children during the government's COVID-19 health response period?
Sure. Kia ora everyone. My name's Hazel Tukuriri. I just wanted to start off introducing myself and just being a voice for so many wahine out there and men that had their voice taken away. I was born and bred in Mangere and currently live in Manurewa. So right in the thick of what I'm about to speak about, my husband, he hails from the far north, from Kaitaia, and was raised in Bluff. So I'm speaking to anyone in between those towns. That's all of New Zealand right now. So I'm gonna set the tone and kōrero about domestic violence. So for me and my family, my whānau, I'm a mother of 11. Me and my husband have 11 children, and I'm proudly fully unvaxxed. So when our country went into this craze of lockdown, it was so daunting on me and my whānau. We have a housing house and we stay in Manurewa. So for our family being so big, what went on in my head and my husband's head was anxiety and worry, fear. If any of our children get sick, any of us get sick, that we could all die, because that's what the government told us. So we did lock our kids up. We wouldn't let them play outside. We wouldn't let them out the gate, because that's what the government told us to do. Not to associate with anybody else. So we live in a two-story home with quite odd. There's a one-bedroom upstairs. And so me and my husband, we told our kids that that's where they will be staying until this lockdown is over. You can imagine the pressure our kids were under, and us as parents, we're very overprotective parents, and we just didn't want a germ or anything to come near our children, because this is what we were told. We were full. And we would sanitize the grounds, do, extreme things as parents. Sanitize our shoes as we went up. I was a shopper, I went up the road. And during this time, it caused so much stress and frustration to our tamariki and to us. Every time someone exited the house, there was a kariki about that. Whether or not they're going to bring home COVID, and the anxiety I had being the person doing the shopping, I'm going to make all my kids sick. And that stand that I took to not be vaccinated, when the vaccination came around, the peer pressure that put on us as well. Let alone finances. I don't have to explain that with the amount of children I have. So let's talk about the violence, that side of things. It became violent even with my children. So during the COVID lockdown, I lost my kids. I was called neglectful. because I wouldn't let them go to school when school reopened. But I was that afraid of sending my kids to school, because that's what we were told, that's what we were fooled, that I wouldn't let them. And I had children that were flying in school. They're doing so well. And while the media would show things on Good Morning, like people colour coordinating their clothes, we didn't go through that, not at all. We were trying to fight for our family to stay well. So my kids my big girls, because they're bigger than me, one was in year 13, the other in year 12, and they would fight me, physically fight me, to get down the stairs just to go to school. But I knew I was doing the right thing, because that's what the government told me. So my kids fought their way out the door and ran to school. Within the first week, they started back. School was closed again. They were locked up again. So I felt like the government exposed my kids to the virus by letting them go back to school and go around everyone after telling us not to. And I feel like we will never get that time back. We will never undo the harm that has been done. So I just want to tap into that percentage of people that went through domestic violence. It was out the roof. You know, we stayed in Rewa, there was call-outs all around us. So just know that you have a voice through me.
Hazel, the inhumane policies of the New Zealand government in regards to the police's ability to respond to domestic violence situations, those have affected you personally as well. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I sure can. So with me and my husband, because we're dealing with all these children that are upset, frustrated, had a guts full. You know, you put anyone in a room for this long, it's like being in a cage. And we would have to deal with these whawhai all the time and try and settle and try and reassess everything every day. And it caused us to fight a lot, more than we ever had. Because we're right in each other's face, we're not allowed to leave, we're not allowed to go to whānau. Whānau didn't want us to come over either because we burst in their bubble. So we felt so isolated and just felt like we had no voice. Everything was on the phone or you were on hold forever. No one answered.
Thank you, Hazel. Well, jury, you've seen the impacts of isolation. You've seen it compounded, and you've heard the statistics of 172,000 cases of domestic violence and the strain on the police force and an inability to respond to that. So Hazel, I would like to thank you for providing your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I might add one thing to that, when we had a big fight and I took my sons and I went to the one neighbour that would let me in and I asked her to can I use your phone to ring the cops? And you know what she said to me? She said to me, should I ring Man Up or should I ring the police? And I really wish we had rung Man Up, because they rung the police. And a question I was asked over the phone, let alone my life was at risk, and so were my tamariki. They asked me if I was vaccinated. They asked me the size of my family, if they were vaccinated. And you know what I answered? So they took 3.5 hours to come. 3.5 hours, and during that time, who knows what would have happened. I had to hibernate, I had to hide myself within my neighbour's home, someone that was loving enough to help another New Zealander. So really stuff the government. We need to sack that government ASAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel Tukuriri. You've just seen a snapshot inside the home, inside the four walls of what represents many New Zealanders during that time.
Next witness, prosecution.
Thank you, Your Honour. I'd like to introduce my next witness. At the height of the government lockdown measures, no tangihanga or funerals were allowed. During level 3 lockdown, funerals were still limited to just 10 people. Families were restricted from performing cultural practices in their homes. And before that, they were left with saying goodbye to their loved ones, handing them over to the hands of a funeral director and being forced to wave goodbye at the front door. During 2020 and 2021, there were 34,000 deaths in New Zealand. That is 34,000 Kiwi families that were restricted in the way that they could grieve their loved ones. 34,000 families denied the one opportunity to honour their loved ones in the appropriate way and in a way that would make them heal. Surely there would have been another way for families to express their grief. I now invite my next witness to the stand, Mr. Paris Winiata. Paris, you've had to face every parent's worst nightmare during this time. And in your own words and in your own time, could you please tell the jury here today your experience and how this government's inhumane policies have affected you and your family?
As the prosecutor has alluded to, there were 34,000+ families that suffered losses last year. My wife and I were one of them. And not to take anything away from the whānaus that lost loved ones, ours unfortunately wasn't due to natural attrition. Ours was a promise that was given to us before we were married, that we would be born a boy. This boy was a promised child that we so longed for. He passed away at the age of 14 months. And the government and their restrictions did not allow my whānau and our friends, key people in our lives that were going to deliver us strength, hope and peace to grieve during this process. We're not talking about 2020 when the level 4 lockdown, we're talking about August 2021 when science and statistics showed us that COVID was not a threat to our communities. For the last nearly 12 months, I've sat here wondering why me, why my son? And it's become evident today that this burden that I must carry is a burden that I must carry so that no one here in my nation has to carry that burden ever again. That if your loved ones pass away, I will stand and fight so that you can go through the grieving process that you so deserve.
Thank you, Paris. Paris, at the time that you were carrying out the funeral for your boy, I'd like to ask you about your vaccinated family members, because vaccinated family and friends, surely the government would have allowed them to attend the funeral, as the government were the ones who were ensuring the safety of the vaccination.
As we've clearly established here today that the government have lied over and over and over again. And like most people, I wasn't truly aware of the extent until it affected me personally, me and my whānau. And that's why I choose to stand today, so that no one else has to go through the same thing. I would rather give you foresight rather than hindsight. They told us, if you want to go to music festivals, get vaccinated. If you want to be able to work in your chosen career, get vaccinated. They said if you want to attend tangihanga, get vaccinated. If you want to mourn and grieve with your whānau and friends, get vaccinated. Well, I had family and friends double vaccinated, wearing masks, complying in every aspect that the government put upon us, and were still unable to attend my son's tangi. If that's not enough for you to get rid of this government, I don't know what is.
Thank you, Paris. Paris, I just want to, there's a process of grieving that is natural to all people. That takes time, but it's particularly around having family around. Can you please talk about how the government's actions affected your grieving process?
The process is still going through today. Still unable to see whānau and friends, loved ones. It's like going over his burial. Every single time I see a whānau member or friend that was unable to visit his tangi, that the embrace is all over again. The strength that should have been provided for me on the day that I laid him to rest is continuing to have to overflow in the memories of the tragic things that we saw, that I went through, is played over and over and over again. And I speak not just from physical harm, but mental welfare. We already know we're in a state of emergency with our mental health and where we're at. And I've got whānau and friends that I haven't seen for a long time that are here today, flown all the way from Australia. To be here with everyone else, to stand and fight. And for me, that's again going back over that. That's that embrace that they're giving me is an embrace that they should have been able to give me. That was my right to attain that embrace and that grieving process when I laid him to rest. I shouldn't be forced to have to go through over and over and over again the tragic loss that happened to me and my family. But in my closing statement, I do want to say, as hard as it has been and the loss that we have had to go through, I will go through it over and over and over again so that my fellow citizens of New Zealand won't have to go through it.
Thank you very much, Paris Wuniata, for your testimony. There you see, Your Honour, an example of how the inhumane practices of this government have tampered with the natural process of human care and love for one another. I'd like now to call my next witness to the stand, Your Honour. From September to November in 2020, over 16,000 New Zealand businesses closed permanently, compared to 7,000 over the same period in the year before. Your Honour, that's an increase of 127%. Business closures were prominent in the sectors most affected by the pandemic, including hospitality, tourism, wholesale trade and the fitness sectors. For business owners, Your Honour, closing a business can be like a death. Years of sheer hard work all down the drain despite their very best efforts, and the feeling of failure and uncertainty of the future can deeply affect their mental well-being. I would like now to call upon the next witness to the stand, Steve Oliver. Thank you for being here today, Steve. Could you please tell us about your business and how the government's lockdowns have affected it initially?
Yeah, my name's Steve Oliver. We just run a family gym. Yeah, it's just a regular gym in West Auckland, and you know, we've just been 3 generations deep in the community, and we just you know, the community's the focus, and we were told to lock down, and you know, we could just see, you know, the first lockdown we done as we're told, and we locked down, but then we could see in the community all these experts were telling us stuff was going on. It was like watching a episode of Shortland Street. It was like something's happening on TV, but in the reality in community it's not happening. So we just made a call and we're like, man, you know, there's people out there suffering, there's people losing their families, people losing their jobs. You know, mental health is a real issue. That's the killer in our community, so we're just going to open up. So we just wanted to be a safety net and a safe place for the fathers and the mothers that you know, were losing everything at the time, and you know, the families that they couldn't access. You know, they couldn't go to the movies as a family, couldn't go to the pools, couldn't even go to the library. You know, it was such a danger to the community. And the kids, you know, the kids at 12 years old were given, you know, told to make a choice whether they took a needle or not when, adults regret a tattoo after 2 weeks. And, they were kicked out of their family networks. They were kicked out of their sports teams. Just at a time, a real crucial time when kids are trying to find their identity was huge. So there was a real mental health issue going right through the family, from the adults right through to the children. So we just wanted to be that safe space and wanted to stay open just for the community.
So Steve, you made a courageous decision to stay open, to provide all of the services and the care that you normally do for your community. Can you tell me how the government dealt with you not wanting to close your doors?
We're getting, constant emails and constant phone calls telling us that they're going to prosecute and shut us down. And there's a lot of pressure, on us as a family, and they just make visits coming around to my business, trying to make us out like we're criminals. And I just said, man, I've got kids that are suicidal. I'm the only safe place for these kids. I'm the only place they can go. So if I close the door, that's on me. You know what I mean? So go ahead, throw your fines around. And they even went to the extent of redirecting our gym phone line to a vaccine hotline. I don't think they got too many hits off that one, but it's pretty feeble.
So you're talking about fines is one thing, but the additional pressure, and I would say the word bullying, that has been directed at your family, I guess that further compounds the threat to your business. What were the personal effects on your family of that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of anxiety. I've lived a full life and always, gone out on the front foot and in sport and business and everything, and proud of what we've achieved. And it was a time. It puts a lot of pressure on the family. Puts a lot of pressure on. I've got 5 kids in the house. I've got 8 kids. All up, we got, my baby just had a 2-year-old birthday just on Saturday, and you feel bad, because the pressure's real. The kids, you're missing out on those, those beautiful years with your kids under this pressure, and sometimes you just got to do what's right, no matter what the personal costs.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you, prosecution. If you could introduce your final witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honour. 62,000 Kiwis reported experiencing an adverse reaction to the COVID-19 vaccine that was recommended by the government. 3,500 of them reported serious, life-shortening reactions, including myocarditis, stroke, heart inflammations, paralysis, and heart attacks. As lockdown restrictions relaxed and we went back to our normal lives, there was a large group of Kiwis who could not go back to normal. Many of them had trusted the government and were trying to remain compliant in order to keep their jobs and support their families, but they had been seriously injured and life as they knew it had dramatically changed. Your Honour, I now invite the next witness to the stand, Tania Martin. Tania, your husband Rob has been affected by the government's vaccine mandates during this time. Could you please tell the jury your experience?
Hi, kia ora everybody. I'm here to be a witness on behalf of my husband. This is my husband. I put him on a t-shirt. I made this for this occasion. He's over here. So he was here at the last freedom protest. But yeah, since COVID, his life has been flipped upside down for the worse. I'm here on his behalf, but I'm also standing for all vaccine injured. There's thousands and thousands and thousands, and many that have lost their lives. So I'm here to represent them. My husband, he's a good man. He's a good man, and he's the strongest man I know. But he was he was fit and he was healthy. And yeah, 18 years ago we were here. We were here protesting, and enough is enough. My husband, he was a specialised usher. He was up there at the front, more than well able to hold his own, but he can't anymore. He needs a stick to aid him while he walks. He is in constant pain, and he has chest pains, and he's in agony, and now, you know, if he needs to go a long distance, he needs a wheelchair, and that's what the vaccination has done to him.
I'm sorry to hear that, Tanya. You know, New Zealand has ACC to provide financial relief and support to Kiwis who are dealing with injuries and accidents. This is what our taxes pay for. How has ACC supported your family during this time?
ACC who? What? Nothing. Nothing. We've paid our taxes. We've worked many years. And for what? A vaccination injury is not an accident. A heart attack and a stroke is not an accident. Where do we go? We're back on a benefit? Oh, and can I ask you a question? Not you, but maybe ask the government. Jacinda Ardern, this question's for you. Where's my supported living payment? I didn't get that. My husband didn't get that. But you go and pay it to people that are dead in a grave, and you go and pay it to people that are overseas that don't need an income, and we need it because we don't have a job anymore. But I didn't get a living supported whatever payment.
Tanya, you're clearly not getting the support that is due to you and that your taxes and our taxes pays for. Without having that support, and with what your husband is going through right now, take me a little bit through what your day-to-day life looks like now.
Day-to-day, it's a little bit hard for me. Like, it's not about me, it's about my husband, and I'm standing for All Blacks Injured. But in my home right now, I've got an 11-year-old daughter who has a slipped hip, so she's got one leg longer than the other. I've got a moko who was in hospital last night because of a virus, and I tell you, you know, before COVID, they didn't tell you about a virus. If you had kids that were sick, they would say viral infection. Now they're naming all the viruses. They're making sure that it's not a COVID. They name all the viruses out there. But you know, we all got pressures of life. We're all going through things. So just add on top of all of that, my husband, who's in constant pain. It's just not right. It's wrong.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for your testimony.
Love and light, Neil. God bless.
Thank you, prosecution. Could you please make your closing statements?
Thank you, Your Honour. Well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard the testimonies of all the witnesses that have stood before you today. These stories, well, they are but representative of the thousands upon thousands of New Zealanders who have had their lives adversely affected and impacted by what they have been through by this government, our defendant. And you've seen just a snapshot of what goes on behind the four walls of their private homes. That's a simple snapshot of the wider impacts that have happened to many families that go unnoticed, that go unacknowledged, and that go ignored by the defendant, this government. If I can remind you today, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the charge that have been brought to the court this morning is about inhumane acts, intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body, mental or physical health. I'm sure that you would be in agreement with me that the testimonies that you have heard today attest to the very thing that this charge is holding against this government. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's critical for you to find the defendant guilty of the charges held and send a strong message to this government, to the defendant who is on trial today, that their actions cannot continue. The evidence that you've seen today is undeniable. It's not anecdote, it's not media lies, it's undeniable evidence of this government's heartless, inhumane treatment to its own people. I trust, jury, that you will reach a verdict fitting of this defendant's inhumane actions. Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you, prosecution. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard from the prosecution and each of the witnesses today. It is now time for you to deliberate amongst yourselves and deliver your verdict as a group. Shortly, the court will go into recess, and when the court resumes, if you believe the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, you will be asked to shout out guilty. If you believe the defendant is not guilty, please remain silent. Now, I just want to reiterate that and repeat it so that we're clear. When the court resumes, if you believe the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, you will be asked to shout guilty. If you believe the defendant is not guilty, please remain silent. Until then, court is in recess for 2 minutes. Kia ora.